Okay, let's start nice and early. Good evening and good morning, Unicorn fam. Welcome to the RBW Emission Reduction Working Session with Aron Beierschmitt, Crypto Unicorn CEO and co-founder. In the wake of the recent staking emission reduction proposal snapshot result, we would like to reopen the dialogue on the reduction of staking emissions by putting forward a new proposal, and we want to hear from you. For those who missed it, you can read on the details in the forums at forum.cryptounicorns.fun. You may also ask questions in the event thread on the Town Hall Bulletin. I'm going to share the link right now in the general chat. So for those who would like to ask a question, feel free to ask your question there. We already have a couple of questions there going on, and Aron is going to make sure to answer all the relevant questions about the staking emission reduction proposal. Do you have any opening words, Aron?
No, not really. I think we've made our position pretty clear. It's certainly my belief that the majority of our community members agree with a reduction, and so I'm certainly here to answer questions that are relevant on this topic. And obviously, if anyone would like to come up and chat about this, happy to have a conversation. But for now, let's get to questions.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Aron. So we usually have a 3 questions per person rule for any kind of live event. We don't have that rule for this event. So if you would like to ask anything, go ahead, ask away. You can at any time press the request to speak button and speak. We will prioritize spoken questions over written ones, but for now, let us go over the written questions. Witty, can you read us the first one?
Sure, the first one we have is from Cuppy. Do you believe the project will survive and thrive if the proposal does not pass?
I do not. That is why we're voting on it.
Alright, the second question is investors who bought RBW during and shortly after the IDO at higher prices and are down 95 to 99%. Many new investors have locked their tokens for up to a year. Do you think it is fair for Laguna Games to drastically reduce their staking rewards against their will?
I would argue that it's not against the will of the majority of individual participants based on the vote. It is against the will of some of our larger holders. Listen, I'm not expecting people to vote always against their short-term interest. And it's very clear that many of our larger holders can't see beyond that. But again, the DAO can do anything the DAO wants. That is the reality of what we've created here. And occasionally there will be factions and disagreements between those factions inside of the DAO itself. And here we have a disagreement. At the end of the day, changing the emissions is literally just sending less RBW during our weekly ops to the contract. It's not actually adjusting the contract code at all. It's simply making an operational change. It's well within the DAO's right to do. So, in this case, I think, again, this is a little bit of theater here. It's very clear to me that I've got the support and will of the majority of individual participants, even if there are a few larger holders frustrated by this. Like, quite frankly, if you've been just restaking your stake over the last year, you're in a great position to see this occur. If you've been selling a lot of your stake, you absolutely want your emissions to continue at the same rate. But I think it's insane here, especially after what we've seen in DeFi summer. There's just been drastic emission reductions across the board with the vast majority of projects, and this recognition that high APY generally is just not sustainable. You can certainly see that in our token price. I think the argument that it is just on growth and it is just on the team is kind of absurd, right? With any new amount of demand, right, relative to the supply that we have coming online every single day, right? There's new supply coming online every single day. Hell, we just spent a year distributing over 100 million tokens exclusively to our earliest players and supporters. And so again, I just don't think the people against this proposal have much of a leg to stand on beyond their own short-term interests. The reality is no one's going to care if the token goes up in value following these changes in growth, right? And we will settle into a new, more sustainable APY with value that makes more sense than it does today. Like, we have just seen the reality of the last year and what occurred when we gave out the APY we currently have to stakers. You can just see what has happened, right? And the community complained more and more and more about stakers earning too much relative to the game. And so, you know what we did? We allowed you to earn RBW in the game itself, post the release of quests. And you can see even further sell pressure there, right? So there is this just general take a step back. The fact that we've distributed, you know, over 100 million tokens exclusively to our earliest community members and supporters. The fact that those tokens are max locked 1 year from today. You know, again, it puts these holders in a position where they've earned their tokens. If you've been dumping your tokens, you've been dumping your tokens, right? It's well within your right to do that. But I can see why someone who's been doing that is frustrated by the idea that their emissions are getting, you know, that the emissions are getting cut. So generally, I've seen most of the comments. I've seen most of the arguments. The idea that it's just on and a demand problem, I think, is incorrect relative to most other projects in the space. And you can see this evidented in our data.
All right, thank you, Aaron. And lastly, from Copy is reducing staking rewards would mean investors will be less incentivized to lock their tokens. The circulating supply would increase and have a negative effect on the token price and offset the positive effect that reducing staking rewards would have. This proposal is unfavorable to investors and favorable to team and seed investors. Is this statement true?
No. The reality is reducing, you know, the APY from, let's say, 82% to like 39%. If the value of the token doubles or triples from here, again, it's not going to matter, right? I think the wider space looks at our token. Our token holds us back because it looks awful. It looks awful in part because some of our largest holders have been dumping throughout the year against what was always kind of a relatively thin amount of liquidity. And so the reality is just that this conversation around APY is silly. It should be around value, right? And, you know, you can have I mean, again, we have seen this time and time again throughout DeFi summer, and you've seen projects that started with ridiculous APYs all change and you know, go to APYs that are way more reasonable and sustainable over time, right? Token distribution and emissions should really be in lockstep with demand. We have not had a lot of new demand. Yes, we have had new players, but we have certainly not seen a rapid increase in the player base. I believe that, especially in the current market with the players who are still here in this bear market, they look at token price and they want to see a token that is at the very least relatively stable when looking at new games to play. And I'm just tired of looking at the token charts in the gaming category and seeing RBW trashed when many of the tokens, you know, don't have game loops or have barely shipped anything. And that's frustrating. We should all be frustrated by that. And again, for any new amount of demand, if you reduce the amount of new supply entering the market, you're going to see price increase. And so I think that that is the rallying cry that we should all be getting behind here, and it benefits everyone. And I want to dispel this notion that like the team and the investors get the advantage. I saw other comments around this, and it's just a ridiculous narrative, right? We're not changing the amount of rewards in the staking pool. You're right. Reducing emissions extends the runway of that pool. It extends the amount of time that players will have to drain that pool. So it does mean that the distribution to that pool gets reduced. Again, the investors and team have already pushed their initial unlock date back by more than a year. In addition to that, we vest over 2 years. So it's just this absurd notion that day one, the team and the investors are just going to wholesale dump. And this has now been dispelled. Look at Magic Token, look at ApeCoin, look at Access. They have all had major unlocks at this point. And what are their prices doing compared to ours? So clearly you can see what has happened with price when our players have had and been the only agents within the system that can buy or sell. And you've seen the results of what has happened to our token price over that period of time. I would actually trust a professional group of investors with LPs and certain restrictions on what they can and can't do over a group of pseudo-anonymous, holders within our Discord, like just straight up. And so we haven't seen in the space other projects collapse after these unlocks begin to occur. And when you think about the idea that, we don't receive the last of our tokens until March of 2026. Like, we are the participants within this ecosystem that have the longest term incentive to see it be successful. If you just want to default to human greed, like, that is the reality of the system as it is set up. And players kind of have max a 1-year time horizon based on stake. Even today, right? That is the max lockup possible. It is literally 1 year from every day. So maybe 2 or 3 years from now, we need to rediscuss this again based on where we're at. And quite frankly, at that point, the community may be in control and can make different changes. So again, I just think a lot of the narratives predominantly being put forward by a small group of individuals are and don't have much weight to them. I think, again, they're just arguing for their side without seeing the potential benefit that this proposal will have. And I do think the adjustment to this proposal relative to the last one addresses a few of the concerns that individuals reaching directly out to me had, which is like, one, just a 75% reduction to single side staking emissions is very drastic, and it could have consequences of people unlocking. A softer reduction to it, coupled with a little bit of demand, is likely going to have value per day equal out, if not begin to increase. And I think if that occurs, the vast majority of people will stick around. They stand to benefit far more if we are successful than they do from dumping at a massive, massive loss like they could today. So anyway, that sums up, I guess, my thoughts with a lot of the comments that I've seen in Discord, as well as questions from that individual.
Okay, thank you so much, Aron. We have another member of the Discord agreeing with that the emission reduction is necessary to address the challenges within the team. However, they have a suggestion. They would like to suggest for the team and investors to further extend the time lock by the same amount as the requested staking reduction. So if the proposed staking reduction is 75%, the time lock should be increased by 75%. They say this is to divide the burden equally while not unjustly benefiting certain parties over the others. What do you think about that?
I believe the initial time lock, I believe that the initial time lock is fair and reasonable. So that's kind of that. And then again, we vest 1/24 every month for 24 months. And at that point, if we haven't earned it, the DAO has likely, and crypto unicorns has likely failed. Let's just be straight up about that. Too often, none of you realize you're investing in and participating in, these incredibly high risk endeavors. Every single one of these projects in the space is just a game startup at its core. And game startups fail at an enormously high rate. We are at a point here where we need to inflect growth. I think the majority of the community sees this. And by March of 2024, if we've not been successful in that, we've probably had to massively scale back the team, completely changed the roadmap, and suddenly we're managing a long tail experience. Like, you just can't sit here and say that, the timing right now isn't incredibly crucial to make these changes with enough time to see the results play out in a way that we think is going to be very positive. And so, again, we were first to push the unlock date back without any conversation from the community. It's not like the community was pushing that and we, did it out of, we literally just did it, right? So again, you can look at AXS, you can look at ApeCoin, you can look at Magic. They have all had major unlocks and what happened to those tokens. And so again, you might want to start trusting a group of investors that have LPs and are institutionalized over a bunch of degens in Discord, just quite frankly. So that us versus them narrative is a little ridiculous. Yes, our players and community members during the public auction put $14 million up. Or purchased $14 million worth of RBW. Obviously, the investors purchased $16 million worth of RBW prior to that and have had a multi-year unlock, which has not existed at all for community members. Like, the reality of even a year staking is you can begin to claim your rewards after 7 days every single day, right? So I completely reject the idea that the team and the investors are pushing this forward for selfish reasons, when the reality is the community here stands to benefit the most from it. If you have held on to your RBW and continue to stake, you're going to have a year of figuring out whether or not this project is going up or going down. And again, you have way more agency over your tokens than the team and the investors do. And the game theory around us come March 2024, just starting to dump, is again not backed up by what we see in the open market with other projects. And it just generally doesn't make sense. These investors are smart enough to realize that they would destroy confidence in the project with an action like that. And again, it's just not supported by evidence in the open market. When we've seen large unlocks around other projects in the space, right? So I think that narrative is silly and is pitting, this kind of us versus them, putting forward this us versus them mentality, which is just not true.
All
So to
right.
answer the question,
Sorry.
we've already pushed our unlock back once. I feel that is fair. We don't get the last of our tokens until March of 2026. And so again, it's a long road for the team and the investors. It really should be. And I feel that, what we've already done is fair and certainly lines up with the best interests of the community.
All right. Well said. Okay, so next up we have Rubik. Come on over to speak. Hey,
G'day, how you going?
doing great.
I'm doing great. How are you? Things better at your job?
They gave us a credit card to pay for the servers, so that's a good sign. We might get our pay this week. I don't know.
Okay, well,
but
hopefully progress there.
yeah, that's a sign that they want to keep the software going. So yeah, hopefully it looks like it should be good to start work again soon. So, but I'm still being a night owl because I don't have to get up in the morning and work. But yeah, I've just got a question about the maybe a compromise on. Like, I've already suggested this to you many times before, that I thought the price of the number of RBW going into the cost of things is too much to help that rise in price. If you're going to reduce the emissions by 75% as a benefit to the player and to the investors, wouldn't it be good to reduce the cost of RBW across the board in the game, so the gamers aren't actually losing anything out, that are actually spending it in the game?
Well, just to clarify, the new proposal is only a 60% reduction. The one that failed was a 75% reduction, but I get your meaning. We don't control prices in the RMP. We could I mean, we could shut it down and reset the bundles and the liquidity and all of that kind of stuff. So we haven't done that to date. We've adjusted the liquidity, but we've never actually like reset it from the get-go. I'm a big fan of letting the RMP do what the RMP is going to do. The right way to change things would be to just adjust, you know, the tuning and balancing around the economy, right? I know a lot of people were frustrated because we gave out berries in the winter loot box, and that did push price down. So that is the mechanism by which we'd you know, be able to make adjustments on that front. I'm a little less concerned about the price of RBW rising in value and creating an issue where the game becomes, you know, too expensive to play, as long as the source and the sinks are kind of matching up. Players who are grinding it out, doing the quest loop, etc., are going to get the requisite RBW that they need. You're right that a new player coming in certainly has to purchase more dollars worth of value to get the same amount of progress. Partly, I would say that's one of the benefits that players should get for being here today and participating in you know, the game at this early stage, right? You kind of had that advantage. So if you've been really grinding it out, progressing your land and things, as it gets more expensive over time, you know, you're not necessarily going to be affected by that. One of the things we're talking a lot about for new players, Rubik, is just the kind of these like onboarding loot boxes that would be pretty irrelevant to a player that's already leveled up their land, but relatively valuable to early players who are starting out. We certainly have a lot of control to do these kind of direct drops inside of the game to give players either bundles or loot boxes they can open that help them in the early days. And we would do that, you know, via like a newbie leaderboard or something is kind of what we've been discussing. So regardless of what happens to the price of RBW, we have the levers that we need to ensure that like progress doesn't slow to a halt, right? I mean, that's kind of the reality of it. All we're really doing is when we make changes or we tighten things, we're just slowing down progress, right? You have to play more to make the same amount of progress. And you kind of see that throughout the crypto space. Like, it gets harder and harder to mine Bitcoin over time, right? This idea that if you're in early, things were easier. And I'm not sure we get enough credit for some of the changes that we've made over time that really line up with that principle and the idea that, like, yeah, over time it is supposed to get harder to grind and progress through the content, especially as more and more participants join. But I don't think the idea that the price of RBW going up, I don't think that we should not view that as a bad thing in the context of new players, right? Because they'll be able to do quests and things that are giving them RBW they can then go and put in the store itself. And if we ever get to a state where we're like, holy shit, you know, XYZ material is up 50x or something on new player demand, right? Like, we can just turn on the faucets inside of the game to ensure enough of that material is being given out to players, right? That the price balances out. So we can tune at whatever price of RBW is necessary, right? And every, you know, these tuning pushes every 2 weeks kind of gives us the ability to react to changes in the overall economy. Because you're right, like with a price appreciation on RBW, you know, things would certainly get more expensive, but that also gives us the opportunity to give out more things to help balance it out inside of the game itself.
Oh yeah, I just like this, you know, the compromise on losing. Like, it's clear that the players are going to earn less, which will increase the value of RBW, and then as it increases, people will start to dump more. So that's what I think the perception is. But if there was a way to reward the players that spend the RBW in the game by making things cheaper, you know, especially the unicorn and the land minting, then that would be, you know, a pretty good compromise that would be beneficial to everyone. not just to us to play the game. Anyway, that's a good answer. Anyway, what you said. So I hope it's. Is there also another? What about the chance to change it from being a set amount of RBW to breed and evolve to a US dollar figure? So just like $10 for of RBW for a breed and $10 for an evolve or something like that. Is that something
Yeah,
you could do?
we've even talked about like, well, the land vending machine is set out against a bonding curve, individual bonding curves per class of land, right? But like, what if we did a bonding curve on per class of unicorn, right? And naturally create a situation where it just gets more and, there's more and more friction is really how I would look at it from an economic perspective over time to breeding and evolving. So we've looked at that. I've seen your suggestion before around just kind of making it a fixed dollar value. I am interested in creating similar to the LVM this way for unicorn supply to kind of more naturally react with new demand. But again, there's kind of this thing where it's like, if the token prices have gone up, the tokens the game, the vending machine is giving you, the game is giving you, have more value, right? And your question is very good in that, like, value for X amount of progress, right? And I guess the better way of putting it is design is always going to try to keep the amount of value you would need to spend to progress a certain amount in the game roughly equal. It's very difficult when the price is fluctuating, like when the volatility is high and the price is fluctuating very quickly. But over time, you would always hope that like the same amount of value is getting you roughly the same amount of progress. In free to play, that's not necessarily the case because usually those economies, they hyperinflate. So a new player is actually able to come in and for $100 purchase what cost a player that has been here a year $1,000. Like usually it's that hyperinflated over time, and you frequently see that lead to the death of a free to play economy over time, right? In our world, we don't want to hyperinflate, and so the idea is to try to more maintain that. Hey, for $100 worth of RBW, you're getting X, Y, and Z progress, right? And 6 months ago, that was roughly the same, even if the quantity of RBW given where its price was 6 months ago versus today has shifted or changed, right? So that's probably a better way of answering your first question. On the breeding and Evo stuff, like that's what's really interesting. We have, let's call it 1,400 daily active wallets, just over 2,000 monthly active wallets. We have a very high stickiness rate. You look at 112,000 unicorns or something. I haven't looked in the last few days, just for 2,000 wallets, right? So how many unicorns are we going to need to go to 10,000 wallets, right? How many people that come in via jousting convert to farmers? Like these are all the questions that we're kind of asking ourselves on a daily basis. And so I make that point to say if the price of RBW is rising, price of Unum is rising to the point that it's becoming a barrier to the growth of new supply and the demand is there, we're definitely going to be willing to make changes on that front. And that's one of the things that I would like to try to get this community more open to, is the idea that like DAOs are supposed to evolve and change over time and react to outside stimuli, I guess I would say. I think of DAOs a lot more like an organism than I would think of them like a company, for example. And one of the challenges in the space across the board, not just gaming and GameFi, is like all these white papers come out and say, hey, I'm going to distribute, X amount of tokens over, Y amount of time. And here you go, right? And I think a lot of people today are rejecting this idea of like using tokens as a way to reward early participants within an ecosystem. And, everybody's always a 1 or a 0 in the space. And it's like the pendulum has swung away from, all tokenomics are bad. The challenge in tokenomics is distributing the token and trying to match new supply with new demand. And the projects that have succeeded with that over time are few and far between. And most projects really struggle with it. We certainly have. And so I would just kind of hope that most people recognize we're making a change now. We can make another change in the future and another change in the future. And we should really expect over time needing to adapt and change and evolve with the space and where it is at, right? The changes that we're making now may not make sense in the future. And to bring it back to your point, Rubik, like, I want to see demand, and then I want to see unicorn supply continue to increase alongside that demand. And I want to first observe what that does to floor prices, to the prices of the tokens, et cetera, right? If we just get another 2,000 daily active wallets in and 50% of them participate in the farm sim, like, that should mean at least 50,000 more unicorns are necessary, right? Not to mention all the unicorns that go to Joust that need to be replaced on the farm. So I just want to try to observe some of this behavior in the wild first before we kind of say, all right, there needs to be a change to breeding and Evo. But I do like the idea of, potentially changing the setup on it.
Well, the solution to your token is, if you think about it, 150 RBW is, I think it is, to breed and evolve. If a unicorn selling for $40, that's the hard stop of the value of RBW. Whatever 150 RBW, whatever the rate is of an RBW to get to $40, that will get hard stopped at that, in my opinion. I don't think people, you know what I mean? Like, people will stop breeding, and what kind of effect will that have on it? I don't know if they'll stop breeding, but I just think that psychological figure of $40, what the unicorns are selling for, and the RBW value being at $40, if it's that the total cost to breed it. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but you could also, my original idea from over a year ago, is to create a tier 4 jousting potions that need a unicorn essence that you need to sacrifice a unicorn for to create those potions, and then make a price on, like, a $10 cap on RBW cost to breed. You'll just create a cycle. That's my opinion. That's it. That's all. And last thing, Polygon sucks, but crypto unicorn is okay.
I know you're an immutable X. You're an immutable X DJ, I know for sure. Polygon's certainly been struggling. The activity and stuff is a killer.
Just play a game
we'll
on IMX, mate. Experience. It's literally like you don't ever worry about gas. You don't ever worry about. You can play whenever you want. I'm sitting there trying to bloody breed a donkey, and all of a sudden it's going to cost me $3 just to do one of the transactions. I'm like, what the hell? So yeah, you got to wait. Anyway, I'm just having lately. I'm having a bit of a spat because I've been trying to breed a lot and haven't been able to because of Polygon. Well, I haven't because of Polygon. Okay, rant over.
I think the biggest hope for us on that front is just going to be the parallelization research and efforts that they're doing. I do think that that's going to solve a lot of the problems, because it will allow the validators to simultaneously execute transactions for contracts that do not have dependencies. And all that really means is, like, all these Lens protocol mints and all these damn Planet IX transactions and Zen token and all that kind of crap. Those contract transactions have no effect on any of our contract transactions. And what Polygon has identified, and anyway, there's a blog post with the research behind it, is you can basically parallel process those transactions. And that would just mean that the network overall gets a lot faster. We should see a lot less gas spikes and stuff. But I hear your point. Obviously, I have my own issues with IMX that we don't need to get into here. But yeah, the gas pain and the problems and this whole challenge of, as more people participate and come over to Polygon, it will only get worse, does put them in a position where they absolutely have to solve these things. And I personally hope that the parallelization research and efforts is going to get them over the edge.
They're too good at Polygon's just too good at everything to not get it right eventually. It's just a matter of when. They're amazing.
So, and if it takes too long, we're going to be in trouble. So I do have a bit of a worry on that for sure. One of the challenges is we've made our bed with Polygon. Like, it would be so hard to try to migrate, especially for the ERC20 tokens and stuff. And so I'm rooting for them, despite also acknowledging that they've got some problems for sure.
Yeah. All right, mate. I've had the stage for so long. I'll
Thanks
shut
for
up.
having me.
Hope everyone has a good night.
See you, man.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. All right, next up we have SW Martin 19. Come on over.
Hey, what's up, Aaron? How's the baby?
The baby is good. Baby Frank is doing good. He is currently asleep, but then again, I have pretty good noise canceling headphones, so who knows?
Yeah, I can
Thank
only
you for asking.
imagine. Yeah, of course, of course. So I know that you changed the reduction to 60% from 70 or 75% because the LP
Yep.
rewards wouldn't be boosted.
Mhm.
But are you open to the idea of like making that even more aggressive? Like I know there's been pushback, but at the same time you just listed off all these reasons, and if you get like a 2, 3, 4x in RBW price, then you're all of a sudden at the same spot you started at, and you know the same amount of RBW in dollar terms still requires like more demand.
You're asking, did we consider more drastic reductions than 75%, or are you just saying like you don't feel 60% is enough of a reduction based on the current proposal? Just so I understand the question.
Yeah, I don't think 60% is enough. Honestly, I would like to rid of staking altogether and just vote with badges, but I feel like there's no chance of that. So I'm just pushing for a more aggressive number.
Yeah, part of the reason to soften the reduction and not raise the RBW LP is to just let's make a change and see the effect of that change and determine whether or not more is necessary. I think this cut gets us much closer to the competition in terms of their advertised APYs, which I think we should all be concerned if we have a much higher APY than our competition when they have $100 million in daily trading volume or some shit, right? And we have double the APY on incredibly thin liquidity and low volume, right? Like that's just a problem. The argument of like, should it be more drastic? I would just ask that we kind of wait and see a little bit. One of the arguments around like, and I'll just be straight up, Delphi didn't have much concern with any holders unlocking and dumping. Their thought kind of from the beginning, one of the reasons they put forward the 75% reduction was just like, if people really want to leave, fine, let them leave, let them do what they want. Staking to me is just a minor piece of utility for the token. I still believe in the general principle that the more utility for the token, the better. The more use cases for the token, the better. To me, the primary utility of staking is governance. I know to your point, like why not just vote with badges and things? I love what we're doing with staking V2 and this combination of the badges kind of allowing you to accrue more governance power over time. Like that's an experiment that I really want to see play out. And it's just something that I think is like a good thing. Now, I get the general sentiment in the space around staking being a bad thing. I think if staking is the only utility for the token, of course, it's going to fail. We have very high utility, in-game utility. I mean, Rubik just came up and, we talked about this idea that like, you're frequently using RBW, these Chuck E. Cheese tokens inside of the game, as a part of daily play. That is very strong utility. And I've just always wanted staking to be this additional piece, this kind of cherry on top to the overall system. And I really do think that with demand, staking will add to the flywheel effect, because you'll go, well, if I stake some of my RBW over here and continue restaking it, I've got this opportunity to begin to draw on it to enhance my game over time, right? And my progression and vote on things. And so again, just generally, I'm kind of one of those people that's like, I don't think the staking experiment has 1,000% failed yet. And again, I'd be worried about ripping it completely out. So back to the thing, like I think a softer proposal now, not adjusting the RBW LP yet, and just seeing what happens. We've got a lot of things planned over the next 30 days. There's a pretty big announcement that already went live this morning that I'm surprised no one's found yet. he'll be posting on Twitter pretty soon. So we're announcing, big hire today. Again, let's line everything up so that in the next 90 days, we are in a much better position than we are in today. And I do think that this new proposal does enough to set that up. And like I was talking about earlier, Sam, like we can observe what happens in a live and open market and make further changes in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I am just Team Delphi in that there's 5 to 10 different individuals who have hurt the community, and some of the members themselves aren't even aware of it by dumping staking awards repeatedly. And I think, they're down bad enough at this point that if they can keep getting passive income from staking, they're going to continue dumping, and that won't necessarily stop with the 60% reduction. So I just want to minimize the impact they can make altogether. But yeah, 100% agree. Maybe try out 60.
Sorry, I'm laughing because it's kind of funny. You just pointed out why everyone, even the dumpers, stand to potentially benefit from this proposal. If value goes up, they will benefit. They will be able to exit and get more than they could in a world in which the APY remains and they dump it to zero. And so it is kind of this funny thing, like this reduction is actually going to help increase the value extraction of some of the stakers, but in aggregate, less supply is entering the market. And so I would kind of use your statement right there as a way to outright reject a lot of the complaints that some of the holders have brought forward relative to this, because ultimately that is the reality of it. If we constrain supply to meet this new demand, the price will go up. With that price going up, those who are staking and dumping are going to get more value, certainly more value than they would dumping it to zero, right? And so it's kind of that interesting thing. At the end of the day, they're participants in the ecosystem. I don't sit here and have any problem at all with that behavior. And I'm not going to even, call it out. It's literally just the reality of the space. They took a bet on a project. They were looking for something passive, but I would use your statement again as a way to kind of reject some of the pushback that we've gotten on this and really even the previous proposal. Like those who are doing that behavior stand to benefit from this, and they should. They took an early bet on us. They're down really bad. Like, I don't have an issue with that. This isn't us versus them. It's just kind of like, hey, we can't get a few people to agree on realigning their long-term interests, over probably their short-term concerns is how I would put it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm just taking more of an approach like, yeah, if you do 90%, then maybe they dump and then they're just purged and we don't have to deal with the behavior anymore. But you're exactly right. So
that
another
was
question.
Kind of the Delphi mentality, just to be straight up, was just like be drastic, purge them out and move forward. And I'm a little bit more in the middle of that. Again, there is some utility to staking. Governance is something we care about a lot. You can look at some of that data though, and of the 45% of wallets or SRBW holders that did not vote on this previous proposal, we looked roughly, I wrote it down, roughly 78% of those wallets have never voted. So that to me also supports this idea that like we're overpaying for governance. It's very important to us, but like to have such a large chunk really have never voted at all and still not vote on this pretty important proposal, I would say, really indicates that like, okay, we've got this chunk of participants that aren't paying attention to us too much and are, farming the project, for lack of a better term.
Yep. Agreed. On to my next question. So previously you said that you're like against the burning of RBW, but you also alluded to it a little bit in Discord. I was curious if you meant in terms of like just more of a treasury rake or if you actually meant some kind of inherent burn mechanism. And then I also just wanted to give a backdrop. Like I got into Axie as an investor because I was just looking at the revenue that they were bringing in from their marketplace in conjunction with the amount of AXS that was being sunk into the marketplace from fees. So I guess I just kind of want to see more of a RBW to the treasury or burn mechanism outpacing the amount of inflation, as I'm sure that's kind of what you're going for with the 10% take rate from jousting and then 60% staking reductions. But
Yep.
I'm just curious if you've thought more about it.
Yeah, we're really hopeful that the 10% take rate in jousting is a very strong catalyst towards this. And you're absolutely right. And this is kind of the point around timing. Like, we are trying to line up the growth, the emission reduction, and the launch of jousting, as well as Unicorn Party. The team RPG isn't going to have a sync. It will be a slight source in kind of the tournament prizes and stuff around the playtest. So it's kind of jousting, Unicorn Party, the emission reduction, the economic tightening measures that we've been taking and are going to continue to take over the course of the next few tuning pushes. Like, we're trying to line all these pieces up to ensure that, RBW has less supply leaking out from our network, so that any new demand is going to come in and drive value into the economy itself. This kind of actually comes back to some questions I was answering yesterday in Discord. Like Dipbeak was a little worried because of, I guess, a comment that I'd made that only certain stats were going to really matter in jousting, and ultimately those coins were just always going to dominate. And I had to point out that the tournament structure itself and the way we we can basically, in tuning, push a new tournament type out very quickly to say, hey, this is, we can do it by simple things like class or mythic status, or we can go in and say, these power stats, you have to have above or below these power stats. And it creates a situation where we can go in and fill the queue up with a number of tournaments every day, where a wide chunk of players are going to come in every day and know that, well, in a certain tournament, I should have a unicorn that is competitive. And the more we can drive that as we launch new arenas and kind of scale that, the more beneficial, given the more tournaments we run, the more RBW is going into the treasury every day. And you're absolutely right that we're trying to look at ways to increase that, to try to consume or get it equal to the amount of RBW that's leaking out of the system, whether that's the game, whether that's the staking emissions, what have you. So trying to line up all of these pieces and then, use the 90-10 split, and making sure that we've got enough activity in those game loops to drive that is really very important.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and I actually toyed around with the Alluvian beta over the weekend, and it's pretty funny. Their whole design is literally the exact same thing as what we built here and continue to build out. So that's pretty cool to see, given all the hype over there. Also, I just wanted to say a big +1 on the starter loot boxes or something like that, just because I got my girlfriend to start playing, and she's like, I can't do anything because she only has 2 unicorns in 1 land. So I think that would be great. And then last thing, and then I'll hand it over to someone else. Sorry for taking up so much time, but do you have any thoughts on stabling some ETH after the recent run up? I know you're not in the business of day trading a treasury, but just kind of thinking about longevity here.
It's been on my mind a little bit. I've been kind of thinking 2,500 is the threshold to really begin to consider that, and maybe we begin to sell a certain amount above that threshold every month as a way to build up the USDC reserve. Right now, farming the Lido rewards is certainly is relatively lucrative, I would say. So no, I'm not ready to pull the trigger on it. I'm not super confident that the market isn't still crazy. And not going to potentially dip further. I will tell you, if we get back in the hundreds, it would be very tempting to look at deploying a little bit of USDC to capture more ETH with a specific plan to sell it at specific increments on a run up. But yeah, to your point, it's busy enough spending all this time trying to build this damn game. It's hard to want to go in and do some day trading, but looking at, long term, and again, I think the 2,500 per ETH price mark. At that point, we should really consider a little bit of a rebalance on that front. But it is something that, we're keeping kind of in our back pocket. I've been very impatient in the markets in the past, and it's always hurt me. So
Yeah, I think we can all
the
relate to
treasury
that.
and all of that, like we'll make few moves, and those moves will be pretty slow, and very thoughtful for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering all my questions. The last thing I would leave you with is just, I remember a while ago, Navic released a report and kind of cited governance as one of the things they thought was our weak point. And I just kind of want to piggyback off that and say, like, whatever you guys think is right for the team, I think you should do. But yeah, that's all I've got left. So thanks again.
I appreciate the perspective. Thank you, Sam. I've certainly heard that feedback, and it is kind of funny, this idea that, some people are just like, why this governance thing at all? Just be a normal game dev. My pushback there is like, there's something really interesting, really special about allowing the community to guide game dev. I think what's challenging in a lot of this discussion has been around with the community with these last two proposals is just this idea that we're leaning into progressive decentralization, right? And I think throughout history, you can look at, not throughout history, the history of game development, you can look and just see a pattern. The vast majority of successful IPs came from very small teams and usually one, if not two, primary creative kind of visionaries, right? But what is very interesting about the history of gaming is in the long tail of all these titles, you see the mod communities, right? And you can see this in WoW, you can see this in Fallout, you can see this around things like Minecraft that kind of allowed the community to come in very early and create and add value into those systems. So you see, again, like this pattern of very centralized, very tight, usually very small teams at the start. And then over time, the long tail of these experiences, time and time again, we see kind of fall to the community. And I think there's something really interesting about leveraging crypto economic incentives and leveraging token voting as a way to, over time, hand control to the community. And so I know a lot of projects in the space play lip service to this idea of progressive decentralization. It is something that we really are trying to embrace and that we care about a lot. And it's a perfect example of like early on, yes, we are in control of things. We're making the vast majority of the decisions. The idea is every single day we're stepping closer and closer and closer to allowing the community to vote. And you want to hear the really crazy idea, Sam? A lot of our governance, a lot of our tokenomics is based around Curve and VE Curve. It is not identical at all. They have much longer lockups as a starting point. But the thing that's always really fascinated me about Curve and the tokenomics and its governance is it just kind of monetizes, let's just call it greed, right? And the idea that you want more Curve and you're going to maximally lock that Curve in VE Curve to vote and make sure more Curve goes to your pools, right? If I'm supplying liquidity to WrapD, USDC, I'm going to take any Curve emissions that I'm getting, I'm going to lock them up. And you've seen protocols like Convex and Redacted Cartel and others that have literally been created around controlling as much Curve as possible to influence Curves, gauge weights and governance and things. And there's something really interesting about that mechanism and this idea that like over time, giving more and more power to the RBW holders to guide kind of God mode to the sandbox is something I'm very interested in. Because if you want to drive the long-term value to a token, make it control the sandbox that people love and care about, right? And so I've always looked at Curve as something that in some ways is really working because they just cut through the bullshit. And it was like, okay, if you want to control this thing, you need as much Curve as possible. And we've just seen the Legos get built on top of that and all the Curve wars and stuff that occurred. And in some ways, I'm trying to find a way to reflect that here, with what we're creating. And that comes with this idea of over time, more and more and more of the governance, more and more of the meta decisions and meta changes that are being made are weighted towards the people who have participated in the ecosystem, who have earned these tokens, who have purchased these tokens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I get that's the crazy idea here, but it is the experiment that we're trying to run, as we continue to build and kind of flesh out this experiment. And so anyway, you making the point on like just centralize, like I hear you, it would certainly make our lives a lot easier. But there's something interesting about this experiment. I don't think enough projects in the space are looking at ways to leverage tokenomics, token incentives, and governance to like mobilize and activate a community of players and things. And it's something that is really fascinating to me, and I'm excited to see how this experiment kind of continues to play out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I view crypto unicorns as kind of like an app store of itself. So you could see a world where different projects want to build in the app store and then need RBW to direct play and earn emissions to their game loops. So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. That's certainly the hope. Anyway, thank you very
Take
much,
it easy,
Sam.
Aaron.
I
Thanks for
appreciate
doing
you
this.
coming up. Cheers.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. It is time, but we have one more person who wants to ask a question. Do we have time, Aaron?
Yeah, I have time for one more.
All right, perfect. Okay, come on over, please, Mr. RKO.
Man, Aaron, thank you so much for allowing me to farm so many tokens. Man, it feels great, man. I'm not even doing anything for it. Just press staking and I get so much tokens. So this is needed. You know my opinion. It needed to happen before. I've seen it on other projects, like it's like a nail. If you don't do it like sooner, it can collapse. So whatever the team does, I'm supporting you, man. I'm hyped. I'm earning without doing anything. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr.
No
Mr.
problem.
RK, everybody. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody joining. I get that this has been a contentious thing. I would ask that, everybody stay aligned on all the different pieces that we've talked about, with staking emissions really just being a component of it. And the idea that let's try to put everything together, and really see us take the next step forward and enter the growth phase. And I've been saying that for a long time now. I think we finally have the pieces together to make that occur. And win, lose, or draw, we'll observe how this works in a live environment and we can make changes in the future. And that's something we should all take away. It's like, just because we're making a decision now, just because the team and investor tokens are coming in, does not mean that we won't make other changes in the future based on where we sit, right? That is the whole point of the system. That is the whole point of a DAO, is to be in a position where we can make changes over time to react to what is happening, to react to different amounts of growth, to transition us into different phases, right? And I'm very happy to have the community that we have today. I do feel like we've been very fair in the distribution of tokens to date.
Yes, very fair.
This proposal slows down the distribution of tokens, but getting more people in should be priority number one for us all. And again, this is just one of the pieces in the puzzle. I'd ask that generally those who've been against it get over the hump and get excited about and aligned around, let's grow this thing. Let's really take our step into the light. And, I want to be known as the top project in the space, not just on Polygon, in the entire space. And let's do it. Let's do it together. That's what I would ask. I get that there are people who disagree with this. I would hope the majority of you stick around and help see this through. And if you don't, this is the breaking point. I understand that as well. And I certainly won't, hold any ill will against anyone that chooses to leave as a result of this vote. But again, I understand I've got a ton of support from the community here on this, and I really appreciate everyone that came forward today. And yeah, excited to kind of take the next step together. be on the lookout for some fun announcements today, and that in particular that big hire we just made.
Hell
So
yeah. Thank you
exciting
everybody
times ahead, everyone.
for also participating in the proposals. It's important. We are a community, so not only typing in the chat, but get your ass in the forums. Thank you everybody for making it happen. We are growing together.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. Uwu, thank you everyone for the time. Be gentle to the team on Thursday with all the jousting questions, but I'll be there in the audience enjoying not having to be up on the podium. Yeah, I'm excited for them to answer all the fun nitty gritty jousting questions that are coming up from the community.
Oh.
Thanks, Sparkly. Thanks, Witty.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And thank you also, Mr. RKO. That is the last question, folks. Thank you so much to everybody for showing up to the RBW Emission Reduction working session. Any further questions in the thread will be answered by me later on as much as possible. We'll see you later on Thursday for the bi-weekly Town Hall number 31 with members of the internal team. We'll post a recording of this on our socials if you would like to give it a re-listen. Don't forget to share this with your friends and fellow Unicorn fam who couldn't make it. If you have more burning questions, feel free to reach out on our support channels, the mod support channels and the Ask the Devs channel. Keep the conversation going in the forums if you would like on forum.cryptounicorns.fun. This has been Sparkly Unicorn and Witty Unicorn hosting Crypto Unicorn CEO and co-founder Aron Beierschmitt for the working session. Good morning, good night, and see you in game, Unicorn fam. Yeah, okay, Crazy Crypto. I just got a root canal procedure done, and whenever I talk, like whenever something hits my teeth, I just pain happens. So if I sound a little weird for the next couple of town halls, please pay me no mind. I'm getting used to the dental work. Y'all have a great day. Bye.